listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Our producer, Andre Paraiso, with us on the ones and twos, filling in for our guy, Elliot Bowman. But joining us, we've been doing this series throughout this offseason, talking to cool people about football, the sport that we know and love here. And it's a real treat for us at the start of training camp to have Kansas City Chiefs general manager Brett Veach join the GM Shuffle. Brett, we appreciate it, man. You're in the dorm room at camp right now. This is good stuff. We're doing it up, man. Thanks for coming on with us.
Yeah, Femi, Mike, great to be on. Just got to training camp yesterday and got through our first two practices, and so far so good. Excited to be here at St. Joe and look forward to another hopefully successful season.
Old school. Not many people go away any longer with the technology and all that, and you still do. The one thing I think that I love about Andy is your training camps haven't really changed in terms of the intensity and how he approaches preparation for the season. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Coach is obviously a big believer in establishing that mentality from day one, and that's the thing. It's not fun coming up here. It's a lot of work. I always think that the masterpiece behind this whole training camp setup is, Mike, we're here for 3 weeks, and I think the first 10 to 12 days is always exciting. And I think as soon as you get to that first preseason game, you're kind of mentally checked out. You're ready to leave camp and go back to Kansas City. The one thing that Coach always does is he has us come back to camp after that first preseason game. And that's really just to establish that mental toughness and the bodies are hurting and the guys are sore. And I remember last year, I think we went, I believe, to New Orleans. But we came back here in 102 degrees and got after it. But wow. It's all about establishing that mindset and that temperament from early on. And, if you start with that foundation, it'll carry you through the rest of the season.
Yeah, you're talking 102 degrees. I'm sure there's some humidity there. I'm in Vegas right now. There's no humidity, even though we're like in the 110s. 102 in humidity, that's something different there. But I do want to ask you, though, because obviously you guys are the two-time defending Super Bowl champions. And I saw Patrick Mahomes yesterday talking about how, hey, we want to have more fun this year at camp and throughout the season. What did you guys as an organization learn last year where, there were some bumps along the way in the regular season, ultimately finding your way in the postseason. But what did you learn last year that will help you, successfully defend the title this year in 2024?
Yeah, I think, last year we it was kind of an up and down season. I think the pieces were always in place. And I think if you go back to, I think it was the Christmas Day game against Vegas where we kind of got our tails kicked in and in particular on offense, we played poorly. And I think one of the cool things about that part of the season was that was kind of the point in time where let's just get back to basics and let's just play fast and go out there and execute and, let guys make plays. And, I think you kind of saw the team kind of rally around that toward the end of the season. And I think we just kind of dumbed things down, if you will, and just got back to really just training camp day one install stuff and went out there and executed and played faster and played more free. And I think the guys had fun and they weren't thinking. And I think, it's one of those double-edged swords where we've been together for so long and we always want to continue to push the envelope and be creative. And at a certain point, you have to check yourself. And sometimes you get too far away from what you are and what you do best. And I think that was one of those points in times where we just had a little bit of a self-reflection in the mirror and we're able to just identify our problems and go out there and play fast and have fun.
And that's what you did. But you also, to me, Brett, and I use that game as an indication all the time. You changed a little bit, and this is the greatness of Andy. Pacheco averaged 14 carries a game before the Christmas Day game. Then after that, you moved him up to 21 per game. You got back to where you became a physical football team and win with your defense. And I think that's something that not often happens. And as you go into this season, do you think you'll be more like pre-Christmas Day or after Christmas Day?
Well, I think that's the beauty of Coach. I think he's just a mastermind of having a pulse on the team and what direction to go. And obviously when you get into those December, January, February playoff games, I mean, the weather impacts how you play the game, and certainly injuries on both sides of the football kind of determine how you call a game. But I think that's the beauty of what we have here, and certainly we have the ultimate chess piece in Pat Mahomes. But I think our ability to play different styles of football, depending on the opponent, I think really allows us to almost re-identify ourselves as the season goes on. I mean, there'll be periods of a given season where, we're throwing the ball up and down the field. And then there, like you alluded to, Mike, there'll be periods of the season where we can strap it up and play a ball control game and allow our defense to do what they do best. And I think, there's a lot of versatility in this roster. And it starts with the coach and the quarterback, and they allow us to, have the ability to dictate different styles of play.
You mentioned you have the ultimate chess piece in Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, you guys have a tremendous amount of success. I mean, 3-time Super Bowl champions. You guys won the AFC 4 times. You've won the AFC West 8 straight times. You were there when you guys were scouting Mahomes back in 2017, 2018, that time. I guess, when did you realize that Mahomes was going to be a special player? Was it something that you saw pre-draft before you ultimately made the move to go ahead and trade up to get Mahomes? Was it something maybe in that first year when he wasn't starting, when it was Alex Smith? When did you realize that, whoa, we got ourselves a really, really special player here?
It was... It's funny you're talking about after Pat was on our roster.
Don't be modest, Brett. Brett, don't be modest. Don't be modest. Like, take us when you saw him at Texas Tech and you ran back into that building when he was a junior and you were like, I found the guy. Tell us from the first moment you saw him.
Yeah, it's funny because it's been 7-8 years, but it does seem like yesterday. Back at our facility at 1 Arrowhead Drive in Kansas City, there's a small back scouting room. And at the time I was a director of player personnel, and it was a random spring day. And I was kind of going through the NFS list, Mike, as you know, just working through the list. And I think Texas Tech had a tackle. And I remember starting with the bowl game, and it was Texas Tech versus LSU. And, you're kind of watching the tackle, but, you're getting kind of tuned into the whole game, and you see a couple throws early on, then all of a sudden you're not watching the tackle, you're watching the quarterback. And instead of going back and watching another game on the tackle, you're watching another game on the quarterback to another game on the quarterback. And at a certain point, it was, again, a random spring day. Andy walks by, and he just happened to be in there when I was watching him. He said, "Who you watching?" And I jokingly said at the time, "It's our next quarterback." And here we are 8 years later, and 3 Super Bowls and a bunch of wins, and time flies. But it's crazy to look back at that time and to think where we are now and how much we accomplished. But I mean, that's where it all starts. It starts every organization.
Sure
it starts with the scouting department and the coaching staff, the vision for the team, being aligned and all having a similar goal in mind. And Femi, you asked, when did we know? It's funny because I always get asked, what would it have been like if Pat started his rookie year? I mean, obviously, given the success he'd had, it's probably easy to say it would have been successful, but that was not the plan. And Mike, I know you talk about it a lot, about having, it's one thing to have a plan, but being able to articulate the plan. When we went into that process, we wanted the quarterback of the future, but I mean, Alex Smith was coming off a great year, and coach's plan was set in stone. This kid's going to come in here. He's going to learn. Talent-wise, sure, I'm sure he can go out there and do some stuff, but I want to prepare him not just physically, but mentally for what an NFL season is like, and plan worked to perfection. And, we'll never know what Pat would have done if he played that first year, but I mean, he'd be the first one to tell you that, what he was able to learn from Alex that first year was certainly so valuable to him and is, largely contributed to the professional he is today.
The fine line between great and good is so thin, right? It's that thin line. So the day of the draft, did you guys know that Sean Payton wanted Patrick Mahomes? And how were you able to get up ahead of them to beat them to Mahomes?
Right. So working through the process, I mean, there was I would say, throughout the organization, I think a lot of us thought that Arizona and New Orleans were two teams that could go quarterback, might need quarterback. Mike, they were sitting at 11 and 12, and it just so happened that, obviously Coach worked with Sean McDermott, and there was a natural connection there. They were at 10. Sean was just taking over. So you had kind of a formula for a potential trade partner, and you had a new coach coming into Buffalo, a new regime, and they're going to need picks, and they got to start to rebuild that thing. And Sean has done a great job in Buffalo of rebuilding that thing. But they're sitting there at 10 too, and that's also where the the money escalation for the rookie contracts, that top 10, it kind of drops off there at 11. So it was kind of the perfect alignment of the teams needing quarterbacks being there at 11 and 12, that fifth-year option dropping off when you're at 11 and 12, Buffalo being there at 10, Coach and Coach Reed and Coach McDermott having a prior connection, Coach McDermott just getting to Buffalo, trying to acquire picks, build that team. And I don't think we could have gone any higher than 10. So those teams at 6, 7, and 8, I think they were, we were kind of at the mercy of the draft then, and you certainly need a little luck, but I think that was a sweet spot there. And obviously, years down the line, you kind of hear the scuttle that New Orleans would have selected them, and I do believe that. But we were also worried about Arizona too. They were at 11, so getting to 10 was probably the highest we could have gotten, and fortunately for us, it was high enough.
It's crazy because I picture in my mind that you guys throughout that draft process, and you see other teams throughout the pro days, the combine. Are you just kind of trying to hide how giddy you are about this kid? Is anybody even asking you? Because you had Alex Smith at the time and we're running a bit against the break here. But how do you guys hide your excitement for this player saying, "Oh my gosh, we might have our next guy," and nobody really knows it?
Yeah, no, I mean, we were certainly sweating that out the first night of the draft. I remember it was probably early January. Coach called me to his office. Now, keep in mind, we had that conversation back in the spring about Mahomes, and here we are a year later, or half a year later. Now, that might have been April or May, and now it's January of the following year. And
Brett, my bad. I apologize. I'm sorry, Brett. I set you up for failure. I asked you a question with 30 seconds left on the break. I want you to finish your answer. When we come back, we're going to take a quick break here, though. This is the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
All right, we're rolling along here on the GM Shuffle. Here, hanging out with Kansas City Chiefs General Manager Brett Veach. My bad as the host. As we're ending this segment, I asked him the question with 30 seconds left there. We got cut off by the break, but Brett, you were explaining how you guys were kind of kept this secret under wraps here with Patrick Mahomes in that draft process, and how you kind of didn't let everybody know that you guys had so much interest, and you ultimately moved up and made the move for a franchise-changing move for him to be your quarterback.
Yeah, certainly. A nervous draft day for us. But Femi, I was saying earlier when I had talked to Coach about this kid from Texas Tech, the prior spring, fast forward to say January, I think our season was still going on. I got a text from Coach and he wanted to see me. So I came in his office and he had a mock draft printed up, and he had the first 50 picks and Mahomes wasn't even on it. And he said, "Are you sure our guy's coming out this year?" He's like, "He's not even on these mock drafts." And I kind of laughed and I said, "No, he's coming out, and I'm sure by the end of the day, teams will probably have him as a first rounder, and then a few weeks later, you're hearing, late one, and then a few weeks later, you're hearing he could go in the top 10 or top 15." So certainly had a good relationship with his agent, Chris Cabot, and obviously with Pat's tenure here, I still talk to Chris a ton, as you can imagine. But I remember the day of the draft, him saying, Chicago was the other team that Chicago and New Orleans did a lot of work on him. And, when Chicago, I think, made that move up there, we were holding our breath for a second. Once they went quarterback, I thought we had a window there. But you know how this is. When the names are coming off, you're sitting there staring. It's funny. And Mike, I'm sure you can relate to this. When the TV's always a delay. So when you're in the draft room, it's a little quicker. And I remember probably pick 7, 8, and 9, you're just staring at the screen and you keep hitting refresh to see what the teams are doing. But when we finally hit refresh, and I think Cincinnati took John Ross, it was just an exhale, and it was super exciting. And, at the time, it was exciting to have that prospect. If you'd have told me that, you'd be sitting here with, all this success later, it would probably been even more exciting. But certainly a relief. And, I think the whole organization was behind the kid, the player, and the belief, and did a lot of work on him. And when coach brings these quarterbacks in, he puts them through a gauntlet blackboard session, and it's 2-3 hours. And that's another funny story too. When Pat came in that day to do his blackboard work with coach, they must have been going for about 2 or 3 hours. And I would say every 30 minutes, I kind of left my office and I was peeking down the hallway to see if they had broken the meeting, because I wanted to go in there and talk to the coach to see how it went. And at a certain point, I went to check in to see if the meeting had been dismissed and they were still going on. And as I was going back to the office, I heard the door open. Coach came out, looked at me, gave me a thumbs up, and went back in to talk even more football. So had a good sense that after that meeting, coach gave the final blessing there. And that's the one thing that I think if you really spend time with the kid, I think everybody appreciates his athleticism, his arm, his creativity, but he is so stinking smart. I think when people look at Pat, they see all the great throws, and they don't think of him like a Brady or Manning, but I think that's the beauty of him. I think he is just like that, and he's wired like that. And he has that certain edge to him, and he wants to attack teams mentally more so than physically.
I think what people don't realize is guys that have Mahomes traits, Brady, Mahomes, those guys are grinders. Like, they don't get bored. I saw that he said it's the first time he's bringing a television to training camp because he wants to watch the Olympics. But but I think to me that grinder mentality is what separates them. Like, it's just every single day they're the same person. Like you have that drill at your camp. What is it? I think, what do you call it? Where they go 15 plays or they go a long period of time where it's really a conditioning drill. And Mahomes, and you could speak to this, he takes a lot of reps. I mean, he isn't one of those guys that takes 3 reps and lets the backups work, correct?
Yeah, the long drive drill. He certainly does that. And a couple of years ago, actually it was the year we lost Tyreek, Mike, and Pat wanted to make sure that he had a lot of chemistry with Tyreek, and now we had some new receivers, and I think Juju was here and some other guys, and Pat wanted to make sure that he got on the same page with those guys. So the way camp, back in the day, we used to have the 2-a-days, and then after the CBA made the changes, we have a hard practice in the morning, and then you have the afternoon break, and then special teams. And pretty much players like Pat and Kelsey, I mean, after the morning, they're watching their tape, and then they're getting treatment, and that's their day until meetings later on that night. Pat, ever since, I guess, 2 years ago, we get done with practice, we get done with the meetings, and he comes to the special teams phase of practice, brings the receivers in, and goes through the tape. So, you have the coaching element of the coaches breaking down the practice tape, going through the film. Pat will do that again on his own with the receivers. So you're going to get Coach Reed's perspective, you're going to get the OC, the quarterback's perspective, but then you're also, during the special teams phase of our practice, you're going to get Pat's perspective of it too. And I think he's one of those guys, he's always looking for a competitive advantage in any way he can get it. And he is the first one in, the last one out. And he's looking for little things to always challenge himself and to make him 1% better. And that's what makes him so special.
Obviously this is the GM Shuffle, and this is a football podcast, but it's also a team building and a leadership podcast. And early on in our lives, we all need mentors. We all need people that kind of help us along the way. Is there somebody early in your career, whether it's when you were in Philadelphia or when you first got to Kansas City, that you would point to that was that mentor that helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, listen, for me, it would have to be Coach Reed, just because of our special and unique relationship. I had the ability to intern with the Eagles for a couple of years, and then shortly after that, I was hired as coach's assistant. And Mike, reading a bunch of your stuff, the days of taking Coach Walsh around and learning so much from him. I mean, that's almost exactly how I started. I mean, as a coach's assistant, I mean, you're stocking fridges, you're making airport runs, and you're doing different odd and end things just for the coach. And we developed a relationship early on. But I think the one thing that he, to this day, impresses me with the most is just the lack of ego he has. And when I first started working for Philly, Coach Reid had all the success and all these NFC Championship games, and you're almost a little intimidated to talk ball with him, and you just want to listen. You don't want to talk. And I think the cool thing about Coach is I think he's always looking to learn, and he's always inquisitive by nature. And I think, early on, I mean, he would always tell me, you can learn something from anyone. You just got to listen and, be interested in the feedback they have to give. And so it didn't matter if you were an intern or if you were a 20-year, seasoned coordinator. I mean, if you had something to say and you did the homework, Coach wanted to hear what you had to say. And, I still think that I carry that with me today. And when we hire new scouting interns or scouting department members, certainly don't go into any meeting thinking that I have all the answers. And I think that's the one thing that I think the Coach has really rubbed off on me the most is just at the end of the day, you got to be a teacher and you got to care about people. And, that's why Coach is successful. And that's why I think as an organization, we're successful. It's because of the culture that he's created. And again, something that you've alluded to, Mike, is that I know that you'd said in the past that Coach Walsh would obsess more about getting the culture right than drawing up the perfect play. And I think that's exactly what Andy Reid is. I mean, he's more of a guy that wants to get the culture right in the building. The rest will take care of itself.
No question. It's demonstrated. I mean, you take certain guys that he brings into the program. Some people say, well, they can't fit, but he makes them fit because he's such a culture builder. Talk to us a little bit about the impact of NIL. I felt like this draft, there were probably, you correct me, maybe 100 players that would have come out in years, but because they were going to make money and NIL didn't come out. Like, is the value of 4th, 5th, and 6th and 7th rounders still the same based on NIL, or do you think you're going to have to adjust that value?
No, I think we'll see how the long-term effects of this plays out, but I certainly think in the short term, I think there's a bigger drop-off. And, we had talked about that during the course of our draft prep. I mean, you had a large portion of juniors that maybe had 3rd, 4th round grades that in years past would decide to come out. Well, now all of a sudden, obviously they're staying in the school, they're getting paid. And so there is definitely a drop off, I think, that we've seen in particular last year. Once you get past that 3rd round, the 4th round was just not as deep. And then even when you get into the 5th, 6th, 7th round, some of the guys you're looking at are a little bit older in age too. So there's that a little bit drop off in talent. And you're also getting some older prospects too. So now, will that all even out over the years? I don't know, but I certainly think in the short term, teams are going to have to reevaluate that. And I'm sure you'll see a little bit more trading up into those top 5 rounds.
Last one for me before we let you get out of here.
You're right.
Yeah. Last one before we let you get out of here. I know you got a lot going on. The NFL, HBO, they got the Hard Knocks, the offseason with the Giants right now. Would we ever see the Kansas City Chiefs on off-season Hard Knocks as you would be the star of the show, Brett Veach?
I do what they tell me. I mean, if they want to do that, I think it'd be cool. We have some kick-ass Tecmo Bowl. Every year I bring the old Nintendo and we fire up Tecmo Bowl. So once we get done with meetings, we play a few rounds of Tecmo Bowl every night. So I'm sure that'd be good footage to have. I did win the championship last year, so that's a little brag on my Tecmo Bowl skills. But yeah, I'd be all for it. It'd be a lot of fun.
Hang the banner. Hang the banner of the Tecmo Bowl championship.
We appreciate you, Brett. We really do. We know you're busy, and we really appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time. Continued success. I mean, 2 in a row is remarkable, and 3 in a row, if you do that, wow, my hat's off to you.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do, so hopefully we stay healthy and have a shot at the end. But appreciate spending time with you guys and look forward to doing it again.
Awesome stuff there. So hopefully we get everybody healthy out there through training camp. Kansas City Chiefs training camp kicking off here. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. We'll see if they can go and make history and be a 3-time defending Super Bowl champion. That is for us here on the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review as always. Our YouTube audience, make sure you smash that like button. Comment as well. We'll be back later on this week. Until then, we'll see you guys. Have a fun couple of days. We'll be back on Thursday.